This is NDTV. And you're watching NDTV Prime.
Universities and colleges add millions of graduates to the existing workforce every year. But unfortunately, very few are found fit by industry to hire. The problem, of course, is not limited to a particular field of study or industrial sector. It is perhaps systemic. It applies as much to medicine as it does to engineering and management studies. But today on the show, we will limit the discussion to management studies. And to set the agenda for the discussion, I want to mention a few key findings of an ASSOCHAM report released late last year. The report goes on to say only 7% of those graduating are actually employable. Barring those who graduate from top management colleges like the IIMs, FMS, etc., most end up earning less than rupees 10,000 a month. That is, if at all they find placements. Hello and welcome, you're watching Heads Up. To discuss how we can prepare India's young to lead in the global environment, I'm joined by a very special panel. On my left, I have Dr. Shubhro Sen, Director of School of Extended Education and Professional Development and School of Management and Entrepreneurship, Shiv Nadar University. Thanks for joining us, sir. I also have with me Mr. Nishith Arora, Chairman, MPS Limited, Mr. R. Anand, Senior Vice President, HR at HCL Technologies, and Mr. Rohin Kapoor, Director, Deloitte India. Dr. Sen, I want to start with you because it all starts in schools, colleges. It all starts with academia. So there is a problem, and there are reports, on it, not one or two, but multiple reports. If you were to sort of, talk about a few key areas, a few key problem areas, what would they be?
In management education, I think it really stems from a lack of qualified faculty. And that's, so as you go towards the base of the pyramid, I think the talent at that level really thins out rapidly, and that consequently does have an impact on the level of training and education the students get from such institutions. So I think it's really the problem of large numbers. I think we're a bimodal system. Our top
that's not something we should do much about. I mean, large numbers is something
as good, yeah.
Right. Right. So large numbers, of course, I mean, we have to deal with the fact that India has the largest population of, people under 35. I mean, it's a big number that we have to deal with. But that said, that aside, Mr. Kapoor, from the policy side, if you look at the curriculum, it's largely been insular. Things around have been changing. The job scenarios, the kind of jobs which are out there are also changing. But curriculum largely has remained the same.
Yeah.
Why is that the case?
I think the regulators have not been keen enough to change the curriculum with the changing times, and that has had an impact on the total management education sector in the country. Our national policy on education, has been in the works for the last 3 years. So if the policy is taking so much of time, we can just imagine the curriculum refreshment can take so much longer. So I think the curriculum has to be updated, first of all. Secondly, we have to start focusing on getting the global best practices integrated in the management system. And thirdly, our educational institutions and management institutions do not focus on research. Yes, research is extremely important in management education. As we move along the ladder, as we move along the technologies, the education and in management research are going to become very, very important. And
right.
Our education institutions have to start focusing on management research.
And we're not doing enough when it comes to research.
Absolutely.
Mr. Arora, based on your journey as an entrepreneur, when you look at the West, I mean, the Amazons and the Ubers are coming out of those kind of technological innovations are happening there. And graduates from Harvard, Stanford and other such top colleges are the ones who are coming up with such kind of innovations. Why can't we do it? And why can't we run businesses as successful as those?
But if I look at my own journey, I started off, I had the best of education in St. Stephen's and IIM Ahmedabad, and then worked on various companies, worked on various companies, and mid-30s I decided to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And I used to have deep conversations with one of my last bosses at that time, who was an entrepreneur, and he said that the single reason why you're not an entrepreneur already is because of your education, because it sort of reduces your risk-taking ability, because you
right.
analyze too much. You know,
Right.
so that's, I'm just putting it in perspective.
Right.
And if you look at, and I can relate to this even today, because if you look at some of these success stories which you just mentioned, many of these guys are
College
dropouts.
Dr. Sen, do you agree with that point of view? I mean, when it comes to entrepreneurship, it is not something that we are encouraging in universities and colleges?
I do believe that there may have been a case in the past where people were, in a sense, self-selecting. I became a serial entrepreneur. Nishith and I, in fact, have the same background. We studied economics. I studied international politics. Then I did a PhD in business.
Right.
You know, there was no natural path that was emerging towards entrepreneurship, but some inner drive takes you. So I think earlier that was the case. So we're formally committed to entrepreneurship, and we're doing a great deal to facilitate that. And it's not just direct interaction with the students. You have to create an ecosystem that supports creativity, supports self-expression.
To talk about the ecosystem, we have more than 5,500, business colleges in this country. There are many other colleges who also have incubator cells and, are doing various things to promote entrepreneurship. But do you think we are doing as a country, and in terms of policy, I'll get Mr. Kapoor on that, later on, are doing enough to promote it perhaps across the board?
I think we've been making noises about it for a while. Now there's a real move towards it. While there are many incubators, to give you an example, the Shiv Nadar University incubator, it's a partnership with the government. The government is contributing funds as well. So it's a step up in the game in that sense, and many universities today are now formally doing things to actively encourage real experiential learning. And then there's also linkages that you can build into the curriculum. So while the students are doing projects, can they actually develop a distinctive expertise in an area that will be potentially useful for them in their careers? And so those linkages which were earlier left to chance are now being more formally built into the curriculum. So I believe it's a dynamic space.
Right. Industry academia gap. Something which we can bridge in the near future?
Sure, I think steps need to be taken from both the sides. Industry needs to realize that they have a high stake involved in the academia, and they need to take the proactive steps towards working with the academia to ensure that the courses and the skilling opportunities which are being provided are as per the industry standards, so that the ultimate goal of kids who go to a higher education institution in India, management graduates, is actually jobs.
Right.
Very, very few opt for entrepreneurship. So if jobs is the criteria, then industry has to be involved.
Right.
So that is where I feel that industry also has to realize it has a very big stake in it, and actually come forward, work with the government, and ensure that the kids that are being prepared are industry ready.
Right. Mr. Anand, and this is the moment that I was waiting for in the discussion before I can sort of, ask you a question. So industry, according to Mr. Kapoor here, is required to work in tandem with university, with educational institutions. Your view on that?
No, 100% agree with that. I think industry does need to work, but if you peel the onion and say how should industry work with academia, because the devil is in the details, I think you will come to the thing that you should actually have some metrics to measure. So how many management school faculty today consult and get paid for it in the industry? Suppose you had a metric and said that naturally they will be able to bring the context of the industry to the classroom. Secondly, I think regards to the earlier discussion,
right,
why does somebody go to IIM? To get a safe job and settle into their career. But what do we want them to do? We want them to take risk and found companies, right? So there is a mismatch of motivation that is there. I think the MBA preparation industry is perhaps larger than the MBA industry.
Right.
If you take MBA as a school. So
and what about this entire, this is something which I have noticed, and especially recently. Students will go to IITs, then after that they will go to IIMs, and then perhaps they will sit in for UPSC. And which, as long as it is something which the student wanted to do, it's absolutely fine. It's not because of lack of opportunities, is it?
So, couple of things. One, I think the level of career counseling that we do in India. So initially, your parents pretty much decide, and the ecosystem decides what is right to aspire for, right?
Right.
I think that is the reason why people are reinventing themselves and saying this is not me, but this is me, and therefore some part is getting done. The diversion from a premier educational institution into engineering, then to management, then to administration is happening. To some extent, I think it is also a lack of opportunities because of the volume of people that pass out from India. I think there is a danger that we will be underemployed, not perhaps even unemployed, but underemployed.
Right.
I think it is because of that reason also they are doing. Both reasons are there.
Right.
One, I think the degree of career counseling has to be stronger. You need to tell people that it's okay to aspire for what you aspire for. I think that is a big part to blame in that.
You must have interviewed, a countless number of these graduates, who come to you looking for jobs. What, according to you, because we have heard from, Dr. Sen here, he represents academia, we have also heard from Mr. Kapoor and then Mr. Arora. What, according to you, are the problem areas? What is lacking?
So, I think, if you look at the world of academia, right, it is structured to be very predictable, right? There are exams at a particular time, you know how you will get grades and so on, but the world of work is inherently unpredictable, right? And you are not paid to learn, right? You are paid to actually add value to the business. Therefore, there are two things that usually get missed and that we look for. The ability to add value in an ambiguous environment is one of the key things I look for.
Explain that. Ambiguous environment?
So, for example, the problem is not well defined in industry, right? And often effort gets wasted in solving the wrong problem, whereas the problem is well defined in academia. The question is very clear, you have to just find the answer. In the industry, you have to find the question first, right? The right question first. I think the ability to navigate ambiguity, the ability to tolerate the frustration of ambiguity and still make progress, I think that's one of the things that I look for. That is often the place where good students don't make the cut, right? I think therefore the correlation between the so-called grades and the world of work, sort of breaks down there. The second thing is in the world of education, right? People move with their peers. Everybody is in their age group, they relate to that. But in the world of work, they have to relate to a very diverse spectrum of people. So their savviness quotient is something that I check for by asking questions like, have you persuaded somebody to do something? Have you gotten together with a diverse set of people to attempt something?
Do you think that could be solved? And I want to address this to Dr. Sen here. Do you think the kind of issues that Mr. Anand just mentioned, can they perhaps be solved by multidisciplinary education, giving an economic student the option of perhaps even taking up a course in technology, if he eventually wants to work with, a company like HCL later on?
Yes, I mean, I agree 100% with what Anand said, and then also exactly as you're saying, yes, there is a lot that can be done, and schools are doing that increasingly. I mean, again, to use the example at Shiv Nadar, where we are multidisciplinary by design. So, by definition, the students have a common core curriculum that they have to take before they go into their specialization. So we feel that broadens their background, but more importantly, the kind of assignments they get, the kind of opportunities they get to select projects, to think for themselves, to fail, to actually understand how assumptions can lead to very dramatically different results from what was assumed in a stable environment. All that uncertainty and unpredictability needs to be built into their thinking process.
Like Dr. Sen said, students while they're in universities and college should be given the opportunity to fail. You've been an entrepreneur, you have walked that path. Take us through that. Tell us how important it is for a student to have the opportunity to fail in a safe environment, which is while he is in university and college. Because out in the world it means something very different, and I'm sure Mr. Anand agree with me on that. I mean, so I want to have you come in here and tell us about that.
Yeah, I think failure is very much a part of life. I think if I look back at my entrepreneur journey, I think my first project when I decided to become an entrepreneur was to make a etchant for removing copper from while producing printed circuit boards. It was a bizarre project, and I still remember the fumes from all the ammonia, and it was a flop. I mean, the damn thing wouldn't work, and and then I tried after that to become a distributor for semiconductors, and it was bizarre. For 2-3 years I used to be like this, and then along came one good idea, and that worked, and then I was able to build on that. But similarly, even when you're
the idea came from the failure itself, right?
Yeah, failure sort of strengthens you. It sort of closes one door and forces you to go elsewhere, right? So if I look at my success, it's because of the wonderful people I've been able to work with. You pick up somebody who's just a plain vanilla graduate from the most D college possible, and the guys have just performed in our company has been built on people who have sort of worked non-stop, for not gone home for 3 or 4 days or 5 days, and achieved miracles which are admired by customers and which helped us grow.
So I think coming here, I mean, I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but I want Mr. Anand to come here because he's the one at the end of the day who's sitting across the table from a student and, you know, asking him the kind of questions which decide whether he will sort of, you know, make the cut at a particular company or not. So I want to talk to I want you to talk to us about you know, the kind of journeys that you know, both Dr. Sen, you know, and Mr. Arora talked about here. When you look at a student, you know, someone who's jumped ships, you know, has been to different places and has also failed, something he might not want to put on his resume, but when you're talking to these students, do you consciously, you know, ask them about their failures perhaps and what they have learned from it? Do you look for that kind of a candidate? Is it a bad thing to have failed in the past?
Not at all. So in fact, to tell you, at HCL we ran the grandest failure contest where people had to apply for it, and they had to say what was the bold idea they tried, and they must have failed, and they must explain what they learned from it, and it was sponsored right by the chairman himself.
Right.
So we really think only by that failure and that personal involvement, and you know, you cry, you get over it, you will really get a very different learning and a reinvention of yourself.
Yeah, but the crying bit is important, and also getting over
it. Absolutely, that's very important, because that is what makes you. And I think when I talk to people, so for example, if somebody has not got good grades in a particular semester, I ask them, and we look for that sincerity and authenticity, right? If you cheat yourself and you cheat others, it's no good. If you say, okay, so somebody said I played football, I wasted my time, I realized it and I got over it, and here is what it is. Yeah. I think that's perfectly fine. I think it is very important to look for failure, to acknowledge failure, to have learned from failure, and to have that self-acceptance. I think it's extremely important to have that, and I definitely look for that. I know my fellow recruiters also look for it, that authenticity.
Right. So failure
is... just pick up on that.
Please.
One piece, something both Nishith and Mr. Anand both said, we can spark their curiosity. You know, it's often intimidating. We tell people, you must follow your passion, you must follow your passion. Firstly, it's hard to figure out what your passion is.
Yeah.
It's intimidating actually to figure out what your passion. But you can always follow your curiosity. Yeah. And you can follow your curiosity.
Like Mr. Arora said, I mean, he doesn't know what he wants to do a year later, forget the entire lifetime.
And so that's something that institutions can do.
Right.
You know, because it's a dynamic environment, students are always, you know, sparkling with ideas, solutions to problems, so there is room and need for innovation.
Right. Mr. Kapoor.
So what I was saying was, most of the, you know, the biggest corporates in the world are actually being run, the CEOs are Indians. You know, you could talk about Google, Pepsi, and some of those have actually studied in India and then moved on to their higher studies overseas. So there's nothing wrong, it just hasn't evolved, you know, and the government has in the last few years took a lot of focus, increased a lot of focus on evolving the curriculum. On the innovation aspect, we have Atal Innovation Mission.
Right.
So the government is funding labs in schools for students to innovate. They can fail very happily, but they are getting funds from the government. So innovation has, the focus has increased. From a policy side, I think the government has started giving funds. They have realized that the employment opportunities in India are decreasing. Services is not growing at that rate it was growing earlier, and we have to have new companies, new organizations to come in to generate employment opportunities.
Right.
And that is why I think the Startup India mission is very, very important.
And now I want to talk to, I mean, last few minutes of the discussion. So I want to focus on Mr. Anand and Dr. Sen here, because we really want to sort of, you know, figure out what is perhaps the missing link between what is being taught in universities and colleges and what industry requires. So when it comes to collaboration, the kind of collaboration which is perhaps required to sort of, you know, eventually be in a place where you have the kind of graduates which the industry wants and which the academia can also prepare. You have already spoken about what's missing, what's perhaps lacking, but how can industry and academia collaborate?
So I think we need to have a structure, you know, where we can utilize the time of industry, because time of people in the industry is not available. They are busy per se.
Right.
Suppose you get half an hour of that time, what do you want to do? Suppose you get half a day of that time, what do you want to do? Suppose you get 1 week of that time, what do you want to do? I think creating a very robust program structure whereby somebody who is there, you know that, you know, this person can give this to my students and this much time he or she has, and how do we make use of it? I think that program structure has to evolve. Lot of, you know, digital platforms and technologies can be used to evolve that program structure, where like you book a room or book something, book a cab, you can book a faculty. Why not? And I think if you start innovating like that and try to bring that program and stitch the whole thing into an orchestra, it can very well be done. Curriculum design is not a big problem. There are some missing pieces which can get added very easily, right? Awareness is very high. Internet is there. Everybody knows what is going on in the latest this thing. But there is a curriculum transaction. How that design is taught, how it comes live in the classroom. I think there some more work need to be done.
That's where technology can perhaps also play a role.
I mean, there's no question technology has been a game changer at two key levels. One is really the pervasive availability of really high quality content from some of the world's best institutions, some of the world's best thinkers, increasingly available anywhere and almost for free, if not for free. So that is a huge, I think, step where the rising tide will raise all ships, at least those who are keen, and certainly the universities that are interested in developing themselves into global institutions are taking that automatically. The other side where technology has changed business is the playing field itself has been altered. So apropos what Anand was saying, we have to really look at the outcome. There's absolutely nothing preventing a school. We have a corporate MBA program where we work with the leaders of the corporation saying what will the students do in the first 6 to 9 months. And then we look at our curriculum design to see, can we backward integrate, can we build in those, can we get that half an hour of their time, but make that half an hour pointed and useful. So the idea of technology and conversations and better coordination between the stakeholders is where the opportunities lie.
With its contours
and it's eminently feasible. That is what is that it's not like it's a problem that cannot be addressed, because both the academia and the industry have the same goals. And so if we mesh our outcomes and intertwine the training, the outcomes should be very good.
Right. I will give the last word to you, Mr. Arora, because more than job seekers, perhaps what this country needs at this point in time is, job creators, and you've been one. And is entrepreneurship something that could be taught at universities and colleges, or is it something, is it perhaps, the metaphorical gene that one just has or doesn't?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier, in the past, it may have been the gene factor. But I think in today's more complex world, it's education can do a lot. In fact, there are more and more. I've been to IIM Ahmedabad. I'm associated with their entrepreneur program. I go to Harvard Business School, and there's a lot more being done today at the business schools to encourage entrepreneurship. And this is a big change, incidentally, from what was the case maybe 15-20 years ago. 15-20 years ago, I remember being in a forum at IIM Ahmedabad on entrepreneurship, and one guy in the audience, who later I found was a student's father, said, "Am I getting this right? Are you teaching these youngsters to go into business? You don't need this fancy MBA degree from IIM Ahmedabad to to start a business. And for God's sake, don't mislead these children." So there's a sea change from that time to now. So I think the setup is very good, and more and more people will come forward to become entrepreneurs, and as has been mentioned, that's the the need. India needs that.
So it isn't a problem that could just be wished away. What's required, as pointed out by the panelists on the show, is a long-term vision and a clear-cut strategy to achieve the goals. On that note, we will wrap up today's discussion. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, goodbye and thanks for watching.